Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about presentation skills, career, communication, leadership, and so much more. Before I get to our wonderful guest today, I'd like to invite you to see where your presentation skills are strong by taking our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. It's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are strong and are helping you, and where perhaps a bit of support could help you get the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Danielle Silverman of Reinventing You. And I asked Danielle to join us because she is a wonderful career coach who helps you decide when it's time to quit, how to find the new job, but most importantly, what is your purpose and how do you find the job that's going to fulfill yourself, that is going to give you a fulfilling life. I spend a lot of time helping people iron out communication problems so that they can get past the glass ceiling without having to quit, because it's expensive when you quit. But Danielle is the person to turn to when you've decided, yes, it really is time to do something else, and make sure that you don't just take the problem with you when you go to a new organization, but to truly find out what it is you want to do. Danielle's official bio is that she's passionate about helping individuals embrace change. And Danielle Silverman, she uses coaching to accompany clients through career and life transitions. She believes that change is a feature, not a bug, and that as the speed of change is constantly increasing, reinvention is the new literacy. Danielle is based in Montreal, Canada, and she's a fluently bilingual executive leadership change and career management coach and consultant. Danielle has coached hundreds of people in transition and provided management and leadership coaching and training to dozens of organizations. She combines courage, warmth, and compassion. And Danielle brings to the table extensive experience culled through wide-ranging experience in management, marketing communication, business administration, project management, stress management, career management, strategic planning, all sorts of leadership and organizational development in public, private, and the nonprofit sectors. Danielle's a wonderful, warm person with a great deal of wisdom. I know you'll enjoy the interview. On to the conversation with Danielle Silverman. Danielle Silverman, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. I was on your podcast and been meaning to get you back on my podcast, so I'm glad we got this to happen. And I can't wait about all the great things that you have to say. But before we start, let me ask you, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Oh my gosh, there's so many people that I would love to interview, alive or dead. I think the one that comes to mind first is Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou, okay.
Yes. And that's because first of all, I love her quotes and her poetry, but she said something, there's one famous quote that I repeat very often, and that is, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Exactly.
And that's really what I live by.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I hope for the world as well. I
Mm-hmm.
know it sounds a bit lofty, but um, my prayer for the world is really about peace and about how people feel and how, wanting to be happy and fulfilled and at peace with themselves. And so it would be wonderful to have a conversation with her, with her background and everything that she's accomplished and all the difficulties that she's had in her life. And who should be listening? Oh my gosh, everybody.
Yeah,
I don't think it
exactly.
matters. I don't think it
Everybody.
matters,
Yeah.
whether it's people who are speakers or who are coaches or who are in the public eye, or people who just live a quiet life in the country, or who are in turmoil right
Or
now.
just get up every day and, put your shoes on and go forward with what has to be done.
That's right. One step at a time.
One step at a time. Exactly.
One
I
conversation at a time.
One conversation at a time. I always remember a line I read from one of my favorite authors who said that it was a character in a story, and he said, "Sometimes I think prayer is just putting one foot in front of the other."
Mhm. Yes.
So that's what you have to do. Well, yes, I would. I'm a huge fan of Maya Angelou, so absolutely we would.
Okay.
I'll be there too. Great,
Okay.
great.
Good.
So, Danielle, I asked you to be on this podcast because I spend a lot of time helping female executives get past the glass ceiling.
Mhm.
And often it's a matter of straightening out the miscommunication because so often women, especially, but many of us, if we don't feel appreciated, sometimes it's just a communication problem. It's not always, it's not really that it's bias, or people will get fed up and they'll quit and then they find the same problem in another organization because they are the common element. And then sometimes it really you're in an organization where the values are not your values, and it's really, or you're doing something that you're just miserable
Mhm.
and you really don't want to be there anymore.
Mhm.
That's where you come in. That's why, okay, now it's time to call in Danielle and to say, how do you know when it's time to quit your job? How do you know if you're in the wrong job? Or how do you find out what your purpose is?
Okay. I think those are two different questions, actually.
Okay,
But
thank you.
it starts with realizing, first of all, understand realizing that you're unhappy. And so it's trying to figure out why it is you're unhappy. And
Mhm,
most often it is, as you said, because a person's values don't match the company's values.
mhm,
And when that happens, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And the
mhm,
more you try to fit it, the more harm it does you and the
mhm,
sicker you get. So it's about, and I just had an example recently, a client who, let's call her, I don't know, Valerie. She, I
mhm,
haven't even asked her for her permission. So, but this is a true story. She was extremely unhappy in her job, and to the point where she was going to quit. I mean, everybody around her was telling her she needed to quit, but she wasn't quitting for a variety of reasons. And then one day she went to see her doctor, and her doctor said, "What's going on?" So she told her doctor, Valerie told her doctor what was going on. Her doctor said, "I think you need to go on sick leave."
sick leave. Uh-huh.
Sick leave, yes. So, and obviously, and on medication and therapy and all that sort of stuff. So very often what happens is we don't realize what's going on, and we end up getting what the common term is burnt out, but really what
Mhm,
it is it's depression, and
mhm.
it's mental health. So you don't want it to get to that stage. So when you
Okay.
start being a little bit uncomfortable, or you don't get along with your boss or your colleagues, or something is going on, absolutely try and figure out, is it something with me, is it a communication problem, or try and figure out, speak to somebody, whether it's a coach or a therapist, it doesn't matter. As long as you try and build some awareness about what it is that's going on. And if it really is that you and the company need to part ways, then face that and look at it and say, okay, I cannot do this anymore because what they're asking me to do goes against who I am. So fundamentally, it's about understanding who you are and figuring out who you are.
Okay, I like that. All right.
And what you stand for, what you believe in.
Which is easier said than done.
Yes. So that's your second question. How do you go about finding out what your purpose is? Well, there are many different ways. Some people go the traditional route of what are your values, what's your vision, those sorts of things. I like to go at it a little bit differently. And I'm not unique in this. I didn't invent this. I know a couple of people, of other people who have done this, who are doing this. And that is to take stories from your life and try and connect them in some way. So various things that have happened to you, milestone moments in your life, or just anodyne moments in your life that have come up, and that you describe. How did you feel when this happened? Who were you with? What were the circumstances? How old were you? Where were you? That sort of thing. And then we look at those stories and we analyze them, and we look for the threads, the golden threads that are going through these stories. And we look for interrupted dreams, and we look for things that hold us back, that make things about our personality that make us hold back. I'll never forget, if I may tell a quick story.
Sure.
When I was 15, I told my father I wanted to be a doctor. And he said, "Oh, I know you." He said, "I know you like I know the inside of my pocket. You'll never be a doctor." So what did I do? I set out to prove him wrong. And at the age of 19, which is very young, I got into medical school without doing a university degree first.
Wow. Okay.
Right out of grade 13. So, and I failed my first year of medical school because I'm actually very squeamish. So there's a difference between, dissecting a fetal pig and dissecting a human cadaver. So I learned, but, it took me years after that to figure out that this was, I had vowed to prove him wrong. And this was something that was blocking me. So we have to look at all of these things and figure out who we are fundamentally. So much, much later in life, for example, I realized I started doing this for myself. I have clients who did it as well, and I can give you examples of those. But when I did it for myself, I realized that when I was very young, I wanted to be a missionary, which is very funny. And then I wanted to be a teacher, and then I wanted to be a doctor. And when I look at all of those, what's in common? The common is helping people.
Okay. All right.
So fundamentally, this is who I am. And so we look for these things in people. I have another client who, let's call him John, who wrote in his stories that he loved playing soccer when he was a little boy. And he wanted to play defense. That was the role he wanted to play. I thought that was very interesting. And I asked him, why specifically, John, do you want to play soccer? Do you want to play defense? And he said, well, when I was a little boy, my father always told me that I needed to play center because that's where you score the goals. And in life, you want to be there. You want to be there to score the goals. And in his reflection afterwards, John came to me and he said, I realized after our discussion that I don't want to be the number one in the organization. I want to be the number two. I want to be the person who protects the goal, who protects the CEO, who protects the team. And so through the telling of this story, he discovered something about himself that was fundamental to who he is. And that's the process that we go through.
And so what kind of job did he wind up with once he realized this?
He actually wound up as an assistant director to a nonprofit, to a director of a nonprofit organization. And that was very interesting as well, because that's a job that popped up as soon as he started. And that's another thing. I don't believe in coincidences. As soon as you start talking about what it is you want to do, the opportunities come up, the doors open. It's quite extraordinary. And really, time after time after time, this happens.
Danielle, if you're realizing who you are and what you want to do, there's sort of a myth out there that do what you love and the money will follow. Is that really true? Does that happen? Is it possible?
It is possible. It's not always true, but it is possible. I think that it's a fear that many, many, many people have. And it's one of the things that holds people back. And that's also why I don't talk about money until we've gone through the entire process. Because we have to first, you have to first, I love to say, you have to allow yourself to dream. Let the pendulum swing as far possible as you can.
Allow yourself to
And
dream. I love that. Yes.
yeah. And then we will bring it back. We will bring it back to something more realistic. But in the process of going through life stories and whatever else, whatever other exercises that we do go through, in the end, what happens is you come up with a series of possibilities of things that you can do that fit who you are. For the example I gave you of helping others, well, there's so many ways to help others. That's like,
Yes.
gazillion ways. I had to draw a mind map to figure out, where do I want to fit in all of this? And so we there as well, we write down as many things as possible, and then we narrow them down. The idea of monetizing really has to do with once you've figured out what your passion is, who you are, and you need to understand what is the value proposition that you're going to be offering. And so you identify what that is first. You do some market research. Is there a demand for it? First of all, do you actually enjoy it? What specific aspects about it do you enjoy and why? So we really go into trying to figure out, the word in French is décortiquer, really take this thing apart into little pieces
I
to
love
figure out.
that. Yes.
So that you really understand it at its core. Who else is doing it out there? How are they doing it? How is what you want to do any different from what they want to be doing? You can look at, do you have the skills to do what you want to do? Is there any way you can test the waters, do a little bit of exploring, and if it's a service or a product, try and even while keeping your job, just try and test it and see if it works.
It, I love this idea of sort of taking things apart. I remember for years I have been asking people, what's the coolest thing about what you do? And most people can't answer that. What's the part of what you do that really lights you up?
Yeah.
Or what's the part of what you do you wish you would never have to do again? Sometimes that's easier to find. But even that, a lot of people can't pin it down to say, in my job, I need to do this, this, and this, and I need to do A, B, and C. And I can, but the part I really love is B.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the C part so much. And most people can't do that without help.
It's very difficult to do any of this without help. I mean, it is possible. It will take a lot longer. Even if it's just a sounding board, you need somebody to think with. It's very hard to think with a blank canvas, for example.
Well, and we are always too close to our own stories to
Absolutely.
really be objective about it, which is why what you do is so valuable, helping someone being the outside eye and the outside ear, the informed outside ear who can listen and say, maybe this would fit here. Take us a little bit through the process that you take people through. They sit down, they write their stories, they tell their stories. Then what?
So the big, I call myself the vision coach because that's the biggest part of what we do together. It's looking for that vision of who they want to be, who they are fundamentally, and who they believe they want to be. And then exploring that in as much detail as possible in this kind of career or that kind of career or whatever. So for going back to my example of wanting to help people, I could have gone into any one of the paramedical fields, physiotherapy, osteopathy, even massage therapy or something like that. Or it could be in education, or it could be in therapy, or it could be as a coach, which is where I eventually landed. But you have to explore each one of these. And that means going out and speaking to people who are actually doing it and asking them what we call informational interviews. If you've ever gone on a job search, or if you want to change jobs, you know what an informational interview is. Ideal for people who want to change industries, for example, because you don't have to worry about, you're not asking for a job. Networking at that level is really just research. It's exploring. It's finding out what the other person is doing and asking very straight questions. How did you get into this job? What do you like about your job? What do you not like? And you were talking about, you ask people, what is it that you really enjoy? What is it that you don't enjoy? If you had to do it all over again, how would you do it? What advice would you give someone like me? Those kinds of questions. And you also have to be very, very self-aware, very aware of what you're feeling as you walk into the environment, how you relate to the person that you're speaking with, how you relate to what they're saying. Can you imagine yourself being in that position and doing what they're doing? In the process, I go back to my example because it's a full example. I'd actually spent a weekend taking a course in osteopathy, to figure out if this was something I might want to do. And at the end, I decided it wasn't, because I couldn't imagine myself being alone in an office, only without, you're not talking very much when you're working physically with somebody on their body. And I just couldn't imagine it. It wasn't.
Couldn't picture yourself in that situation.
Exactly. So it's about, also trying to visualize, and we do visualization exercises occasionally. Depends. I did that with another client of mine, Sarah, actually not that long ago, at the beginning of the year, when she was trying to decide whether to stay in a job that she really did not enjoy, or if she wanted to do something else. And there was an example she gave me about, she'd done some volunteer work with youth, and she was teaching them some things. And so we did a visualization about how she felt doing that particular volunteer work. And honestly, and I think I have it in one of my podcasts, actually, it was liberating for her, because she realized how much she enjoyed that particular aspect of what she was doing. And she actually went on to be a teacher in her field. In her field.
Yes. What's the first thing you would have somebody do if they're thinking, I need to get out of here, I need to do something else, I'm fed up, I'm ready to quit? What's the first thing you have people do?
It's not really about what I have them do. It's a conversation. So I really want to find out what is going on. I want to find out what mental state they're in, if they are ready to move on and go and find something else, or if they need some other sort of support, like therapy, for example. Because very often what happens is, when you're in a very negative state of mind, and you just want to leave and you want to find a job somewhere else, because you're not in the right state of mind, the interviews you go through, the people you talk with, and through networking, things like that, you will come across as negative. And the people who you're speaking with, whether they realize it or not, unconsciously they're sensing that there's something wrong. And they will push you away. You will not get the job. So we first have to figure out what's going on. And are you ready to make this change? So there's a lot of awareness that has to happen. It's not therapy. I'm not a therapist. I tell people that up front. But we really have to we have to be ready to make that change.
That's true. And taking time to explore is a really good thing. How do you So if somebody's that gone through and they've told their stories and they've found their through line, if you will,
Mhm.
uh, then what?
Well, then, as I said, they interview people to make sure that this is the right thing for them.
Hmm.
And then there's it depends on what it is. Sometimes it's somebody wants to become an entrepreneur, which is a
Hmm.
different way of functioning, a different thing. Sometimes they want to change careers completely. So
Hmm.
it's about figuring out, okay, where do I start? Who do I speak with? What do I need? Do I need to up level my skills? Or do I have transferable skills? Sometimes it's just about finding a job. So I actually had a client last year. We'll call her Carolyn. Was working in the finance industry, and again, very unhappy because that particular organization she was working with, it wasn't meeting her needs. So she was working alone. There was no teamwork, and she missed that.
Hmm.
And as we worked together, she wanted to change completely, and we worked to figure out what it is she wanted to do. She was ready actually to go back to school and do something completely different. She had a personal experience that she wanted to capitalize on, and really was seriously considering doing that. When she came to me one day and said, Danielle, I don't think I can stay in this organization a day longer, but I can't just quit. I have to be able to find a job somewhere else. And so she happened to go to a conference where she met somebody she'd known for many, many years, who worked for an organization that she had a tremendous amount of respect for, and who was happened to also be looking for someone with her skills.
Mm.
And so instead of doing something completely different, like going back to school and so on, she actually transferred her existing skills to another organization through a meeting she had at a conference. So,
That's so important. Yeah.
yeah, so and it's okay. You have to be aware of what you're able to do, what you're willing to do.
Hmm.
Uh, she was willing to go back to school, but there was something that was keeping her from, you know, saying, I can no longer stay here even another day.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
those different things pop up with time. I'm not sure if I answered all of your question, because all of these things happen sometimes that just, come in the way of. But
Right.
technically, if you're going through the whole process to the end, you found that spot and you start to look for it, whether it's working for yourself or going into a different field or going in the same field but with a different organization or a different industry, which
Hmm.
is possible. It's also an option, which most
Hmm.
people don't realize. You can be in technology and work in pharmaceuticals or work in finance, and it's
Yes.
completely different industries. And the people who are in pharmaceuticals believe that you have to have that background or else they will not hire you. Well, that's a myth, or it's a perception that, in my opinion, is incorrect.
I,
So
so
you have
yes.
to cross those barriers.
Which actually brings me to my last question for you is you talked about you and I have talked about the role of reinvention in your
Yeah.
career and in leadership. And
Yes.
certainly it's something that we see over and over again. I mean, we are no longer in a world where someone gets a job right out of college and then they work for 30 years and then they
Right.
retire and go
Correct.
play golf in their
Correct.
retirement.
Correct.
Uh, think my career as an executive coach with presentation skills, I think it's career number 5. So not all of which were my choice, but it's someone says, "How long have you been doing this?" Well, but there are some through lines.
Yes.
It's always been about communication.
Yes.
You've got some great thoughts about the role of reinvention in
Yes.
your career and in leadership.
Yeah.
How do you look at that?
Well, the first thing is to realize that we are living in a world that is in constant turmoil, where change is a constant. It's not a bug, it's a feature of how we
Mhm.
live. So we have to embrace that. And gone, as you say, are the 30-year careers, because organizations today have a lifespan of, on average, about 6 years. And so you're not going to spend 30 years in an organization when it's going to die after 6 years, right?
Mhm.
You have about 3.5 years before you have to reinvent yourself. And in the tech world, it's a lot shorter than that, because
Yes.
uh, if tech companies last 1 year, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So that's reinventing yourself every 6 months. So what you have to do is really understand that you have to constantly uh, look at what you're doing, and a little bit like manufacturing, where you're testing to see if something works or not. Um, the term eludes me, but anyway, um, uh, you test something, and if
Yes.
it works, it works. If it doesn't work, then you have to adjust it. What is it that worked? What didn't work? So you're constantly looking at, what is it that I need to adjust? Um, even as an entrepreneur, when we're
Yes.
doing something, if it's not getting the response that you're expecting, instead of just pushing through and doing the same thing over and over again, which we used to do way back when, now we look at, okay, what is it that, or you go and do a survey, or
Mhm.
you try and figure out what it is that you need to fix. What's working, what isn't working. Keep what's working. Don't throw
Mhm.
out the baby with the bathwater. You keep what's working and you fix what else needs to happen. The
Mhm.
same thing with organizations, and leaders. Leadership of organizations need to understand this. If you want to be able to survive and thrive, get a group of people together in your organization and ask yourself, what would kill the company?
Okay.
What sorts of things might hit us that will
Mm.
kill the company? And in many cases, uh, these past 3 years, it's been a pandemic that
Mhm.
has killed many, many companies, gone from even speakers who've had to
Mhm.
transfer their skills from speaking in person, which was no longer possible, to speaking online.
Mhm.
So having to transform your skills and understand how to do that is a necessity. The same thing with your career.
That sounds very good. And yet, those of us who are still working, we open up the email in the morning and there are fires to be put out and there's 50 new messages in the inbox. How do you take the time or find the time for the long-term thinking, for that sort of analysis in such a short-term world?
I think you still have to go. There are some older rules that are still very valid today. And when you talk about the example of emails, what's important and not urgent?
Mhm.
What's important and urgent? What's not important and urgent? What's
Mhm.
not important and not urgent? Obviously, those you leave them aside.
Mhm.
What can you delegate? What do you have to take care of right away? So, and those are, is it Stephen Covey who came up with those?
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
many, many, many years ago. It's still valid today. And we have a tendency to always want to put out the fires. So there's two timelines. It's today and tomorrow, and we look at these timelines based on what can we do today that will help us tomorrow.
One
And
of the
if
things that I found is, for me to do it, I set up accountability time,
mm,
and I have at least an hour every Friday with an accountability partner
mhm,
where we say we will turn off the internet
yes,
and finish writing this plan or this idea or finish writing this article so that for me, I have to have somebody to report to. I need an accountability partner.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, I am so easily distracted
Yeah.
that knowing I'm meeting somebody is what has me do it. I had earlier in the season, I had a wonderful interview with the great Dory Clark,
Oh,
who
wow,
talks
yes.
about a survey of 100 CEOs
Mhm.
who said 97% of them said the best thing, the most important thing is the time for long-term thinking.
Mhm.
Only 94% of them actually did it.
Yep.
So that's another thing.
Yes.
Well, Danielle Silverman, it's just been wonderful to have you. There's so much more to talk about it. So, dear listeners, if you are curious about if it's time for you to change, if it's time for you to do something else, we'll have Danielle's contact information here. And just tell us quickly what your website is.
My website is reinventing-u.com.
Okay, the letter U.
The
Yes,
letter U, yes.
got it. Yes.
Reinventing-the-letter-u.com.
What's the one thing you would leave our so if we've got a listener who's saying yes, yes, she's speaking my language, what's one thing they can do as soon as they finish listening?
They can start writing down, start thinking about what their stories are.
Mhm.
Start thinking about, what were they like as children? What did they really want to do? And allow themselves to dream.
Allow yourself to dream.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. That's a great phrase to finish on.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
Danielle, thank you so much for joining us on Speakers Who Get Results. And listeners, if you enjoyed this, please tell your friends, subscribe to us on YouTube and on whatever app you're listening to. Do us a favor and leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts. That's the one that people track and would help us a great deal. Tell your friends. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, and I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.